MLS Aces Podcast. This is your host, Tom Sweezy, and we are back with another team preview heading into the 2023 MLS season. An exciting year with the Apple TV deal and everything new coming along here. And today, right now, we are talking Houston Dynamo. We're talking everything Houston. And joining me is Andres Naranjo from the Foxtrot. Andres, how are you? It's glad to see you here and glad to talk some Houston Dynamo.
Oh, hey Tom. It's nice to be here, man. Thank you for bringing me in.
No, of course, of course. Well, I think we should maybe just point out 2022 real quick. Not the best year in Houston Dynamo history. We're looking at a 13th place finish in the Western Conference on 36 points, but we're looking new, right? We're under this new ownership group, and we're looking for some new changes. And I think first and foremost, we should probably talk manager. Ben Olsen, longtime DC United manager, and obviously after his time with DC, he was up in the front office in some NWSL clubs, and I think he was also talking into some of DC United's front office as well. But Ben Olsen, brand new manager for the Houston Dynamo. How are you feeling, or I guess, what are your opinions, thoughts on what Ben Olsen is kind of bring to his era of Houston Dynamo history?
No, yeah, for us it's a pretty big deal. Even though Ben Olsen has had like a lot of experience coaching, like not a lot of people, I like to say like people can just like glance over Ben Olsen, especially with how tactics run like in the
Yeah,
past couple of years in MLS, and also the fact that he's been missing out in MLS for a while now.
yeah,
And for us, it's a big deal only because like not only is he like the first manager that we hired with like professional experience, like in the past couple hires, if you
yeah.
notice our history for like the past few years now, but yeah, Ben Olsen coming is a big deal because of that. But not only that, but for also the fact that he seems to be like a cultural hire.
Hmm.
So essentially, he comes in and tries to establish a culture, and that's I like to bring that up as well because when a press conference called this morning, essentially one of these players, Arthur, one of the players that he brought in, essentially brought up that fact that he wants to win at all costs and that culture that we haven't really had in like years now.
Yeah.
And you just look at our games, and us as fans just expect us to lose in the last minute. You know, even if we take the lead, we're gonna lose at some point, and that's horrible. And it's been an issue, like a yearly issue, like for the Dynamo and just following the team as a whole. It's been a mess, but we're looking forward for Ben Olsen. Like even though like he hasn't been like coaching actively in the past few years now, he's got
Mhm.
enough experience, and it's a big task he's gonna be taking on Houston.
So you mentioned Olsen with the culture and kind of trying to establish that. To me, when I hear that, I hear that, or I hope that front offices and upper management kind of gives the head coach the time to do that, right? Because I'm sure if Paulo Nagamura stuck around for more than a season, or like I guess less than half a full season, I'm sure he would have developed some type of culture. Is it the type of culture that they wanted? Whatever, you can go into that whole debate, but do you feel that Ben Olsen, maybe being someone of a different profile that you guys have seen over the last few years, is someone that will be given maybe a little bit of a longer reign as manager to build that winning culture?
I think it's gonna take time, and there's a good case to be made if we could have given Paul Nagamura a shot, like with
Yeah,
another year or so, and that's fair for sure. And especially with the roster that we had back then, it could have made his case, but unfortunately that wasn't the case, and the Dynamo went in a different direction. In this case, having been also unavailable, and there's a little bit of conspiracy going on in the extent that Ben Olsen was the initial hire before Apollo Nagamura came in,
okay.
and essentially meaning that Nagamura was just like a placeholder to see if anything worked out or not, and it didn't. And I'm guessing, taking that into consideration, they essentially just decided to move on the right way. And that's like I said, that's just like a conspiracy, and essentially like the Dynamo, either way, they just decided to move out from Nagamura, and in that extent, like if it comes down to like results and the product is there already, I believe that I'm gonna be sticking with Ben Olsen for like a couple of years if everything goes right, or if not more.
Okay. I mean, look, again, I think if you're trying to build something, you kind of have to keep the guy in charge there for a little bit, right? It's the only way that really makes sense to me. And I love conspiracy theories. And if we're going to talk around MLS conspiracy theories, then I'm all for it. I'm
No,
all
yeah, and like it's like I said, it's a conspiracy. I don't really like trust it a lot. I just heard
yeah.
it like from someone, but yeah, I'm also like the person that wants to see a project being built,
Yeah.
and of course, like depending on the team you're asking, like it can be like a hard ask only because they want to see results right away, and it's pretty difficult to see that right away. But I would really want to see like a project being built in Houston for Ben Olsen
Yeah. Well,
and the front office.
let's talk about this project that is currently being built under Ben Olsen, and let's talk about, I guess, the departures from the club first, because I mean, it's been a lot of departures so far from the Houston
Yep.
Dynamo this offseason.
Yep.
Longtime mainstay Tim Parker, Adam Lundqvist gone, Memo Rodriguez gone, Fafa Picoult, Darwin Quintero, Darwin Seren, Matias Vera, Zarig Valentin, right? Like a lot of guys who have been a key part of the Houston Dynamo starting 11, the 18, whatever you want to say there, are no longer on this roster. Is that felt right now within the fan base? And obviously your opinion as well, of like a lot of these guys who maybe have been around during some struggling years for us are now gone, and we are moving on to some new faces, and a lot of a lot of homegrown younger faces as well.
For a couple of players that left, it definitely feels for the fan base. But if you ask pretty much like any of the fans that have been sticking around for like the past 10 years, they're gonna tell you that this is the biggest offseason that we had.
Okay.
And what the main reason that you may hear a lot is the fact that most of these players were brought over when Matt Jordan was in, and Matt Jordan is like one of the two reasons why we're in this situation in the first place.
Yeah.
And it's been a long time coming, and this is the like I said, the biggest offseason that we had because we got rid of like 14 players, and a majority of them like they weren't needed, or they just like weren't really up to par, or at least up to league standards. And particularly Darwin Seren and Darwin Quintero, like the two Darwins, like even though Quintero has been like extremely helpful, he's no longer like a starter caliber that's gonna play 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Even though he's gonna come off the bench very well and produce you like a couple of goals here and there in the right situations, like he at this point we have to move on because like he's pretty old now and he's just gonna be riding bench for a while, if not just rotate him, come out in the second half. And Seren, he's like for a few years now, like he's been like that player that has been like, why is he here? Like he's been good for like a year or two, but like he's so inconsistent, and like a lot of people hate him, especially in the fan base. And it like at least for like the players that really um like at least how we feel like may have we might miss a little bit, where essentially we just made like Memo and Alan
Yeah.
Lundqvist. And
Mhm.
Memo, like it's been like pretty difficult for us to get rid of him, but at the same time you have to understand that he needs like a change of scenery.
Yeah,
And
100%.
because and like we love Memo, like he's pretty much like our very first successful homegrown product, and pretty much like wish him to do like very well on the field, and he's just like a class player off the field as well. But unfortunately, like he wasn't really performing very well. He's pretty much inconsistent, and like I'm hoping like he does very well with the Galaxy. As for Adam Lundqvist, like he's been sticking around with us for like the worst years in Dynamo history,
Yeah.
and like but he's been like pretty much involved, and you can just understand him why he will pretty much want to be out. I don't know if it's just like an issue with the project or just essentially just wanting to move on to like a different project entirely. And although I was a little bit surprised that we actually got like 500,000 in GAM out of him,
Really?
only because he wanted out, and I thought maybe the other clubs around the league would have offered less. But I'm guessing the Dynamo took like the biggest offer, and
I do feel like, though, like with Lundqvist, right? Like I do feel he was one of the better fullbacks in Major League Soccer. Fullback's not the strongest position right now in Major League Soccer, so maybe that's why. But I did like his ability a lot. I just feel like, he was stuck on a team that just underperformed for the last few years.
gotcha. No, and if Austin I can get the most out of him,
Yeah.
except whenever they're playing Dynamo, hopefully. He's gonna do very well. He's an extremely talented player and with like a pretty good character. And I wish him the best, honestly.
Yeah.
And like I said, you can understand his situation, and it is like that we just want him to leave altogether. And yeah, and outside of that, like the players that and one player that I actually just forgot to mention was Sam Junqua. Like he's one of the players that his contract actually expired,
Yeah.
and the Dynamo did send an offer his way, but we haven't heard anything still from like the off season. So it's still like pretty great area because we kind of need a fullback, and without him, we have to go out and get a fullback before the
Yeah.
season starts because Brad Smith just kind of getting into like the signings.
Yeah.
Brad Smith is pretty much like still getting into the group of things, and I don't think he's like pretty much starting caliber, but I think he will at some point. But yeah, like outside of that, like pretty much like all the signings that were brought over were pretty much like a long time coming that we had to get rid of. So it's a pretty good off season for the most part, and pretty much just looking forward to the new product on the field.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was gonna say that we can start with those fullback additions. Brad Smith, I know he's coming off a season-ending injury last year with DC. I'm sure he's still kind of recovering and recouping, but back when he was playing with Seattle and he was at the top of his game, he was one of the better, left backs, left wing backs, maybe if you want to consider him a little bit more of an attacking option in the league. So I do have high hopes for Brad Smith. I think if he's fully fit, if he's fully healthy, I think he could bring a lot. And then Franco Escobar on the other side, right, coming off an MLS Cup championship, maybe wasn't asked to start week in and week out for LAFC, but again, we've seen the championship quality from an Escobar during his time with Atlanta, during his time with LAFC. So I do like the defensive additions there to really kind of, I guess, lock down or have Houston try to do their best to lock down what that fullback situation is looking like.
Yeah, so essentially, when you just look in the fullback situation and how they've been bringing in Artur just
Yeah.
to try to at least pair up with Hector Herrera, assuming that they're gonna play like on a line together.
Hmm.
It's still up in the air, like how the lineup is gonna be structured. Only because like we have to bring in a fullback still, and like defenders, maybe not, but it's still pretty weird situation, especially weird in the preseason. As it's gonna be starting tomorrow, since I'm not gonna be able to watch it. But what I can say for sure is that the roster is gonna be looking extremely different, at least
Hmm.
on paper, and yeah, I'm for the most part, I'm pretty excited to see Artur as well as Franco Escobar and Minebasi. Like
Yeah.
those are the players that I've been pretty excited to see in the preseason and hopefully the season coming up. I'm sure that depending on how the midfield is structured, maybe like the offensive players that we brought over, maybe they're gonna be focusing on the wings more often than not, or if not, they can just like switch a little bit to the middle of the park to play as playmaker, particularly for Basi because he can play on the wing and also play as a playmaker. Ivan Franco not so much, but he kind of can really. So
Yeah.
it really depends on how Ben also rolls out on that one. So I'm pretty much looking to that for that one honestly, and particularly and like I said, Brad Smith. It's gonna be a while to see how he turns out, but I
Mhm.
feel like he's gonna be starting if the recovery goes well.
Yeah. I mean, look, you mentioned it there kind of, and I was gonna ask you about that, kind of like maybe what the structure of this team is gonna look like. But I do agree with you that there are some question marks, right? There are a lot of things, maybe some more players that need to come in before we can really see what Ben Olsen has planned. But I mean, look, if you just look straight up, look at a midfield of a Hector Herrera, a Carrasquilla, an Arthur, an Amin Bassi,
Amin Abassi, yeah, I
Amin
pronounce it
Bassi.
Amin Abassi because of the e, but yeah, it's
Thank
you're
you.
pretty close.
No, but still, right? Like, look, like someone of Abasi's to the playmaking ability that I've seen in the tapes that I've watched of him after they announced the signing, right? Like that, he has the abilities of what other MLS GMs and MLS coaches are looking for in a like a top of the line 10 to lead their organization, right? So if you have him in that attacking position in that midfield, setting up the likes of an Ivan Franco, who you guys brought in, Sebastian Ferreira, like these top of the line guys that you guys want to score a bunch of goals in a season, right? You bringing in a Ferreira on a DP deal, you're bringing in an Ivan Franco this offseason to be one of your, top of the line attacking options. I think all of it kind of gets pieced together with that Bossy signing, because he is the thing that's going to kind of make it a three-headed monster instead of just these two guys up top and nothing connecting the play.
No, yeah, and the thing about Sebastian Ferreira is that he didn't have like a dedicated playmaker behind him to essentially just feed him, and he pretty much was the first Dynamo player to essentially have like the most goals in the first season. I believe he was 11.
Okay.
And that's a big deal because like you can just see that Sebastian, like he's gonna score you the goals no matter what. But like if you feed him more, he's gonna score more goals, and he's proven that. And I'm pretty excited just to see that, assuming that Amine Abassi plays behind him or just feeds him the balls on the flanks. And as well as Ivan Franco, because like Franco and Ferreira, they have a history with Club Libertad back in Paraguay, and I don't know, yeah, they just seem to have like a chemistry already, and pretty much one of the things that we've been missing a lot, like when it comes to like offensive minded players, and just having like a true number 10 or just like a playmaker that actually makes plays instead of like scoring the ball to the box and see what happens. We've seen that for like a few years now, and it's annoying. And I'm excited to see that as well because like the sky's the limit at this point, and we'll see if the ball is actually played through the box instead of like sending it there.
Well, for sure. Look, I have a lot of high hopes for the Houston Dynamo this season. I have hopes for a better year and for some of these new faces coming in to be some positive changes that we've seen like around Major League Soccer and bringing that to Houston as well. Andres, I want to thank you for coming on, for talking to me about a little Houston Dynamo. I want you to plug your stuff. Go for it. Tell everyone about you and you covering Houston and the Houston Dash as well.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. But yeah, I've been a Dynamo fan for like over 10 years now, and just recently following the Dash for a few years now. Not as much as Dynamo, but I love the Dash as well, equally. And I've been pretty much active on Twitter for 7 years now. Pretty much just as my platform to like talk about Dynamo, share news initially, but now have like a podcast that I do as well. So on Twitter, and am at Dynamic Foxtrot. You can just follow me there to listen to all my ramblings about both teams, even Dynamo too. MLS Next Pro, which is pretty entertaining. And my podcast, Noodle Time, I do it in English. Pretty much do it on a weekly basis during the season, and also Dinamico in Spanish. Pretty much available almost everywhere. I'm working into that, but yeah, I'm gonna be sharing it on Twitter either way, so you can just hit me out there. And yeah, like I'm pretty crazy about Dynamo, and yeah, just love talking about it as well as the Dash.
And that's why we had you on talking Houston. Andres, thank you so much for coming on, man, and spending some time with me.
No, thank you, Tom.
MLS Aces Podcast. This is your host, Tom Sweezy, and today we're doing another season team recap preview. I don't know what it is, but really bad title for pretty much a conversation about. We're talking about a few different teams heading into the 2023 MLS season, and today we're talking Atlanta United, the former big boys in the East, maybe looking to get back to that status now after a wild off season. Joining me today to talk about Atlanta United is Sam Jones from The Striker. He's also the co-host of the Five Stripes Final podcast. Sam, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, no, it's been a few years since the big boys of the East were actually all that big, hasn't it?
I mean, look, Gonzalo Pineda, I do like him as a manager. I feel like maybe tides are turning on him from the Atlanta United fan point of view, but I like him as a manager. Obviously, I said the Garth Lagerwey addition to the front office was possibly going to be the best move for the next 10 years. If we're going to count all MLS circles and all MLS transactions, I feel like he could have that kind of effect. So before we dive into that, just really want to quickly say for anyone who maybe didn't pay attention to Atlanta United last year, obviously not a great year for them in terms of their standards, and obviously just MLS play, finishing 11th in the Eastern Conference on 40 points and missing the playoffs, right? Just not a great year overall. But Sam, let's start with the offseason, or let's start with the front office maybe, because the Garth Lagerwey edition, I think, is definitely something that needs its deserved attention.
Well, look, I mean, he kind of talks about people maybe feeling a little harsh towards Gonzalo Pineda right now. And it's largely because no one wants to wait around for Atlanta United to come good after 3 years of pretty mediocre performances,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of impatience right now, and it's kind of tough to explain to people, wait, let Garth cook here. Let this happen, right? We're talking about a guy who, of course, RSL in Seattle, just pretty much unprecedented success as a front office executive, and now he's coming to a place where, Seattle isn't broke by any means, right? But Atlanta is in a tier kind of by themselves. I mean, you could throw LAFC and the Galaxy, I think, in there as well, but we're talking like playing on sandbox mode here within MLS, and it's going to pay off. Will that be this year? I really don't know.
I mean, look, I personally don't think it's going to be this year, but I think maybe even as soon as the 2024 season, as I feel like when we could really start seeing the effects of it. I think this year is a little bit of a transition year. You have some of the contracts from last year, and you have some of maybe the players that, again, I know Garth's not the ones making the decisions. He's been very clear in saying he's not the ones making the decisions, and he's kind of coming in at a higher role. But I'm sure he's part of conversations on what's won and what's lost in Major League Soccer. So maybe some of Garth's guys are going to start coming in and being part of this roster now for the foreseeable future. But let's talk about some of the guys on the in and out. It's been really quiet on the in. I think early on, the Derek Etienne Jr. Acquisition was one that made sense, one that I think you've openly spoken about, that like, this is awesome, like this needs to happen, it's perfect. And outside of that, it's been two goalkeepers in Clement Diop and Quentin Westberg, some veterans around Major League Soccer. I know we're potentially close to getting some more Atlanta United news, maybe a DP striker and stuff like that. But let's talk about the ins right now. How are you feeling about what's happened and what could come?
Again, this kind of feeds into the impatience some people are feeling, right? When you have the Etienne thing drop immediately and you go, okay, wow, that's perfect. They nailed that. And then pretty much nothing for a few months here. But look, things are coming. They've said 3 players are coming in. We know who 2 of those players most likely are, even if they aren't technically official yet. Luis Abram coming in as a center back, a left-footed center back who should fit in pretty easily into the starting lineup, it seems like. Maybe have some concerns about his overall ability on the ball and the kind of moment he's in. It seems like he struggled with Cruz Azul and Granada as well. But the big one, of course, that everyone's kind of been following, the transfer saga, is Yorgos Yakimakis. I've been practicing that name daily.
Happy you just said that, because I wasn't even going to attempt it. I'm just backing off that.
I literally walk around the house going, Yorgos Yakimakis. I think I finally got it. Look, he seems to fit perfectly. It's a very Garth signing in the sense that Atlanta's profile of DP has been younger since the start, right? Even Joseph coming in. Joseph was 23 when he came in, right? This 28-year-old who has considerable experience and does a lot of the things that Joseph kind of did when Joseph was at his best. He attacks both post. He makes a ton of direct movements in the box. He has great body control. He's 6'1", but an extremely talented athlete who can, score from odd angles, who can bring out the overhead kick every now and then. It seems like he's going to be a fit both from his skill set and from his mentality. He seems extremely intense. Seems like a guy who's in the same mold as Joseph. And Atlanta United needs a mentality shakeup. They seem a little, I think the word is soft at times from back to front. So this could be really, really huge for Atlanta.
I mean, look, I want to get to Josef Martinez in a second, but obviously replacing a guy of his stature within the city, within the club, just also on and off the field of everything he's done is very difficult to do. And even, if this guy comes in and he starts lighting it up, there are going to be fans right away who I'm sure are just going to start comparing to Josef back and forth and are going to have maybe a little tension there. But he does seem like that Garth profile, that Raul Ruiz Diaz-esque type profile of guy who's going to come in and be a very good player from the jump and, kind of start fitting in with the Thiago Amadas, the Derek Etienne Juniors of the team for sure. So let's talk about the outs really quick, because Josef Martinez, obviously the top of that. And again, I'll get to him in a little bit, but you can also add the names of Alan Franco, George Campbell, Marcelino Moreno, Emerson Hyman, Dom Dwyer, obviously the young crop of goalkeepers you guys had in rotation last year, and a few other players, of course, a few other depth pieces there. But what, for me, it's a lot of exodus of talent. But
Mhm.
at the same exact time, there is still so much talent on this roster, which I think shows or goes to show how unlucky you guys were with the injury bug last year.
I think to some extent it's true that it's an excess of talent, but I'm not sure the overall collection of talent is really going to be all that missed in Atlanta
Mhm,
United.
mhm.
We're talking, I mean, the biggest one I think is probably Alan Franco, who
Yeah,
started, I think, more games than anyone last year for Atlanta United. But for everything he did well, I mean, we're talking about a 99th percentile on ball center back,
yeah.
excellent passer, great dribbler. He made decisions at times defensively, and they weren't always very, very good. He really kind of struggled defensively, and especially at the beginning of the year in both seasons with Atlanta United.
Yeah.
You should be able to upgrade on that.
Mhm.
You lose Emerson Hyndman as well. Emerson hurt for a long time. It really never seemed to kind of click in Atlanta as well. You lose George Campbell, who had potential, but also didn't necessarily make a lot of great decisions defensively. Everything that has been lost are guys who probably didn't have a place
Yeah.
within the best version of Atlanta United.
Mhm.
Frankly, coming into the offseason, we were looking around saying, well, how is Atlanta going to clear any cap space? Because who's gonna pay for Marcy Moreno,
Yeah.
right? Who's gonna pay for Emerson Hyndman coming off an ACL tear when he didn't play half the season once he returned, right? So for Atlanta to make these moves and start to dig out of the hole they dug for themselves,
Mhm.
that's big. That's big. Is that going to make the fan base feel any better about things? Not initially, but it's still big.
Exactly, right. It is huge if you're looking at this as the long-term project under Garth and, you need to clear up that space for the future again to get in more of maybe these new guys, these new vision guys. I think it's definitely big. And right, and I can understand and agree with you that most of the guys that you lost, and I hate talking about people and players like this because they're not objects, they're people. But
Mhm.
a lot of these guys were replaceable, right? Like you can replace them with maybe younger talent, with maybe different kinds of talent across the league as well. But let's finish up the departures with Josef Martinez. I
Mhm.
think I could probably do an average job at talking about what Josef Martinez meant to Atlanta United, what he meant to the club, the city, the history, the fan base, everything like that. But for someone, covering the team, for someone connected to the team, is there, I guess, maybe a way that you could probably do it 100 times better than I could?
I think there are a very limited amount of athletes in Atlanta's generally miserable sports history that carry the credibility and the clout of Joseph Martinez, which sounds insane for an
Yeah,
MLS player, but I mean, we're talking about a one name guy, right? You say Joseph within the
yeah,
city, everyone knows who it is on the same level that you say Hank, you say Chipper, you say Vic, you say Dion, right? Like those
yeah.
guys, and Joseph is in that tier. You go around the city and you see murals of this guy. Still, I mean,
Mhm.
you see murals of this guy. It's an MLS player, and he's got that kind of credibility within the city. We have a running bit in Atlanta about build the statue, right? And I genuinely think he'll probably get something like that at some point for what he did for the franchise. And to be fair to the club, I think everyone involved has said, well, how do you place Joseph Martinez? You don't. You
Yeah,
don't do it, right? You simply cannot do it. So it's a huge cultural loss, right? And the only way they're going to fix it is if they win a bunch.
yeah,
And it remains to be seen how quickly that's going to happen. On the field, though, to be frank and to be open about the situation with Joseph, he had so many issues with his knee, and this was not his fault necessarily. It's just that
mhm,
there were complications with his initial surgery, his initial comeback. There were multiple surgeries after that, and you could tell he just never really got to a point where he trusted his knee. He lost his explosiveness. He lost his ability to contribute to the team in meaningful ways beyond scoring goals as a substitute. And it's a genuine risk for Miami to come in and say, okay, we'll give you a max TAM and probably start you next to Leo Campana, which I'm super interested to see how that works. He's not the same guy. He's not the same guy, and it was time for everyone to move on. So we'll see how it works out. But as far as replacing the cultural cash that Joseph has, you're
yeah.
not going to do it.
Exactly, right. I think the culture loss is definitely the biggest thing because he was really the last piece of the winning ways, the winning culture that was set in the early days of Atlanta United. But let's focus on the guys on the team. Let's focus on the roster and what 2023 could potentially hold. Questionable, I guess not questionable. I always am, maybe I'm a pessimist and I always like to wait until the club announces it, the league announces it before we consider anything. But obviously there's a big question mark around the striker right now until things get finalized there. But there is a lot of still attacking talent on this team. Luis Araju. There's a Rajos, a Rajus. I can't get it down in MLS honestly at this point. But arguably, honestly, one of the fastest guys in the league. He's been a little inconsistent, but he does show the flashes of like he can be a top tier winger in MLS. Derek Etienne Jr. now Edwin Mosquera. I personally am a fan of Jackson Conway. I really like him a lot, but I think he's still a future play. Thiago Almada also obviously coming in to attack, the World Cup champion. What's your thoughts on the attack heading into 2023? Obviously, again, with maybe a DP striker coming in that could change the entire thing.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of it. And I want to start with Luis, who might be the most frustrating player in MLS. Third in the league in shots last year, collected a decent amount of XG, but his shot selection was atrocious. Maybe the worst shot selection in MLS history. We're talking about a guy, again, third in the league in shots. He only scored 5 times. And that's because a large chunk of his shots were coming not only from outside the box, but like not in zone 14, not next to the arc, like from the wings. And the part of that is on him. The other part of that is he probably didn't trust his teammates to get into good positions because they were so limited at striker and they were so limited on the opposite wing. So it's fixable. It's extremely fixable for Luis Araujo, who we tell people all the time when we're watching practice that he might be the best practice player in MLS. If they can just get him to focus in the same way and make the right decisions, he's going to be a star on a huge level. But it seems to be a bigger task than maybe we think, right? It may not be just as simple as say, hey, go take better shots.
Yeah.
Now, what should help with that? You talked about Derek Etienne Jr. Atlanta was lacking really anyone who was willing to make runs in behind last year. According to Second Spectrum, Etienne was 11th in runs challenging the back line last year. Luis Araujo was 154th. So you can see the difference in profiles there. And the fact that Atlanta United didn't have that Etienne-like profile really kind of limited what decisions he was willing to make and comfortable making, right? So Etienne should help that. Giakoumakis is a player who makes runs consistently, and that should raise the floor of everything. And at that point, Almada's going to be outstanding. He's an incredible passer. He's Carlos Gil a couple of years before Carlos Gil's like MVP year, right? We're talking that kind of level. It should all work really, really well, except for the fact that the midfield is really terrible. And so the big concern right now is you obviously have the attacking talent, but is everything going to click together?
Yeah.
And how difficult is all of it? How difficult is it to make it work when you don't have the guys behind you in midfield, making things easier for both the attack and the defense?
The midfield does give me a lot of question marks. It's like there is a lot of like hope, right, with like a Santiago Sosa and a Franco Ibarra, but we haven't seen it in MLS play. We've seen it in flashes, I'd argue, but we haven't seen it consistently. Rossetto, I'm not a big fan of the guy, honestly, that much. Ozzy Alonso is not getting any younger at this point. There's a lot of question marks around the rest of this Atlanta United midfield, and I know we're running out of time here, Sam. So I want to finish things off for the listeners on the defense, right? Because I think if there's maybe any part of this team that you can look at right now and be like we're pretty confident in, it's maybe that back line, even as of right now, before adding a center back. I think I do like JJ Parata a lot. I know maybe he's not the best out there that you're going to see, but I do like the mentality that he brings to the team. And, I do like him shouting at Josef Martinez after a hat trick last year. And just that, you get Miles Robinson back from injury, which is obviously a huge addition. Brooks Lennon, Andrew Gutman. I mean, like you guys, and then obviously Brad Guzan back in net as well after a year of injury, but there is a lot of talent on this back line, and maybe outside of some center back depth, some depth as well. So What's your take right now on maybe, again, this is my opinion, of the defense so far being the anchor of this Atlanta United team?
That's obviously it was the hope kind of coming into the year,
Yeah.
and then they went out and in their first preseason game against Chattanooga FC put in one of the single worst defensive performances I've ever seen from any team at any level. So
Preseason.
it was atrocious. I mean, after talking about fixing the defensive mistakes all off season and everything like that, you would hope that they were a little bit concerned after that. Maybe not the media and me and you and fans and everything like that. Maybe we shouldn't be concerned, but I hope the team was concerned about that. Look, you're exactly right. It's a deep group. I think the depth at fullback especially is pretty outstanding. You have Caleb Wiley and Ronald Hernandez as your backups. That's really, really solid. You mentioned the center backs already. And of course, as long as Miles Robinson can return to a place where he looks somewhat like the Miles Robinson pre-Achilles tear, you have one of the best center backs in the league. I'm worried about Brad Gazan, frankly. He was struggling a bit even before the injury. And, that could be a potential issue down the road, but Atlanta did a good job of bringing in Clément Diop and Quentin Westbrook to potentially be backups if that does come to the point where you need to put in the backups, right? So it should be improved. Again, the midfield makes all of that more difficult, but in theory, the third player coming in that they talked about would be a midfielder that should help sort all that out. The problem is we really haven't heard anything about who that midfielder might be.
Well, there's still a lot of question marks, I guess, to be answered for Atlanta United, but I definitely think, in my opinion, we're going to see a year of better soccer. If everyone can, knock on wood, hopefully stay healthy, we're going to see a year of better soccer down in Atlanta. Sam Jones from the Strikers. Sam, I'll let you plug whatever you want to plug right now, but thank you so much, man, for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Y'all go check out thestriker.com. It's independent soccer coverage of a couple of different markets. We're in Texas, we're in LA, and we're in, of course, Atlanta as well. It's $5 a month, and we feel like we're doing some pretty good stuff. So go check that out. Go check out the newsletter I do for MLS every day. It's called the Daily Kickoff, MLSsoccer.com/newsletters as well. That's all I got.
All good. Sam, thank you so much for joining me.
Appreciate it.
Okay. I'm still recording, but MLS Aces Podcast. This is your host, Tom Sweezy. We're back with another season team preview. There's no official name. We're just talking teams, previewing them all heading into the 2023 season. Right now, we are talking San Jose Earthquakes. We're talking Quakes at the end of the day. And with me is Ivan Ornelas from the Tectonic Takes podcast. Ivan, how are you? Thank you for coming on, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, hi, Tom. It's great to be here. I've enjoyed listening to MLS Aces for some time now, so I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad I got a listener on as well.
Yeah.
But San Jose, we were talking a little bit before this. Minimal moves, yes, but I don't think bad moves at all, right? And I think San Jose is primed to potentially take some steps forward in the Western Conference in 2023. If you guys don't remember, 2022, not a great year for San Jose, finishing bottom of the Western Conference and 14th place on 35 points. Bringing in, Luchi Gonzalez, full-time manager for 2023. Players on the out, Jan Gregish, Eric Remedi, Shea Salinas, obviously retiring. Some of the more notable players on the out. Some of the notable players on the in. Judson re-signing, Tommy Thompson re-signing, Michael Baldissimo coming in, and probably the biggest, I would say, player coming in so far to start the season is Daniel, your time acquisition goalkeeper from South America. So I guess, Ivan, we'll start just high level on the offseason. How have you felt the offseason's gone with Lucci and what the front office has done?
Right. I think it's tough because we've seen off seasons like this before where we've had some influx of a few key players that obviously were going to be starters, but it seems like every season in the last few years has been one step forward, two steps back. We had a little bit of a brief resurgence once MLS restarted play following the early stages of the pandemic. We made the quarterfinals of the MLS's back tournament. We made the playoffs that year. But since then, it's kind of been a regression to the norm for the most part since the Quakes won the Supporters Shield back in 2012, which is now 11 years ago, which is weird to say. But I think we're making tough decisions, but decisions that make sense, particularly with Daniel. And I look at Daniel and I look at JT Marcinkowski. For me, I feel like JT Marcinkowski, he's been a good player, he's made some mistakes, but ultimately he's made a lot of good saves that have kept the Quakes in it and kind of overshadowed his good performances, because sometimes he's just been good, but then like he would, through his fault / no fault of his own, would also let in 2, 3, 4. So I feel like this is a move that it might just be a reshake, and Daniel will be given every opportunity to start. I feel like this is the type of move that is not just going here to be a backup. It's going to be in with a chance of starting, and with the addition of the expanded Leagues Cup, as well as the U.S. Open Cup, which was one of the bright spots. The Quakes did make a good run in the U.S. Open Cup last season, although it was ended by Sacramento Republic, which is a big deal for them. I think that will mean that regardless of who ends up winning the 1 and the 2 job, Daniel and JT Marcinkowski, both of them will be given opportunities.
Look, I think there'll be a ton of minutes to play for every single MLS team, and you need depth more than any year I think we can even remotely think of in MLS history.
Yes, depth has been a big problem, I think, for San Jose Earthquakes as well, because in the best of times, I've seen a really good starting 11, and then depth, I think we've seen some good out of Cade and Benji, like whoever's been starting, whoever's been on the bench, that's been good depth regardless. And then some flashes from players like Nico Tsakiris and Useni Buddha. But beyond that, like I feel like our depth has been shallow at times, and that has been exposed whenever we've had an injury or suspension. So depth is going to be key. Someone like Michael Baldissimo, where I feel like it could be a little more either way, whether he's a starter or whether he's on the bench. I think either way, that's going to be a good opportunity for those midweek fixtures. It's the bane of our existence in MLS because they can happen with less rhyme or reason than in the Premier League. You know, you kind of see it coming in the Premier League. It's like, oh, you make it far in the FA Cup or the Energy Drink Cup. Oh, then you're going to get a midweek fixture. But ultimately, with MLS, it just happens, and we have to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly, right. And thankfully, things are a little bit more structured now with the Apple TV deal, and then trying to make things a little bit more structured there. So that's
yes. And shout out to Danielle Slayton, who is one of the color commentators for the San Jose Earthquakes. I'm really thrilled that she got the opportunity to be among the Apple TV commentators as well. She's also done tremendous work covering Olympics and the Women's Euros, so I'm really happy for her.
No, she's definitely she's been around. I've seen her work, whether it's through, you know, obviously when it was ESPN Plus and you saw some local,
right,
or some more national stuff. Danielle, congratulations as well. But you mentioned the attack, right? You mentioned a little bit about Cade and Benji. This attack does have a lot of fun pieces to it. Jeremy Ebobisse last year scored a ton, right? Christian Espinoza, we know what he is as a DP. He is a very good player, a very good distributor in his own right. You know, he's maybe not going to light the league on fire, but I think a top DP quality type player. Benji blew up onto the scene last year. We saw Cade last night extremely just, you know, look amazing against a Serbia C team, whatever, but still getting a shot and still taking advantage of it. What do you make right now of what this San Jose Earthquakes attack could look like under Luchi Gonzalez in 2023?
I think that this attack is very interesting. I'll talk about Cade Cowell a little bit more. I look at Cade Cowell as similar to Jordan Poole for the Golden State Warriors. He's a very flashy, talented player, but I think his confidence has been rocked a little bit. And because of that change in role, sometimes Cade Cowell's a starter, sometimes Cade Cowell's coming off the bench. And similar to Jordan Poole, he's a very talented player, but with the way the Warriors are set up, sometimes he's a starter, sometimes he's on the bench. And I think Cade Cowell, he plays with a lot of confidence and flair. He's missing a little bit of technique, but you can see that the talent is there, and I think he knows he's talented, and maybe there's a little bit of a frustration as he sees more and more MLS young players make their move to Europe, whether it be to the Scottish League, Belgium, or wherever, just getting a chance in Europe. Cade Cowell's hoping to make that transition, if not, maybe not 2023, I think 2024 could be that time for him. But I think if he can make that next step and he can make some better decisions sometimes. You don't have to beat 2-3 players just because you can. You can pass it off to Ebobisse, to Kikanovic, to Jamiro Montero. And then that actually is a pretty good transition for someone like Jamiro Montero. He was in that influx of players that came in last season from Philadelphia Union. I'm surprised that Philadelphia Union were willing to make that move. And props to Philadelphia Union for getting to the MLS Cup without him. So a lot of great things happened throughout the MLS season, but we're happy to have Jamir Montero here, the Cape Verde international, and I think that the attack is definitely the half of the team of the San Jose Earthquakes I'm more confident in because we've seen how they work together. And I think that if we can give someone like Nico Tsakiris a bit more minutes, I think that he's that kind of player that, similar to how Tommy Thompson and Jackson Ewell were integrated into the San Jose Earthquake system very young, and they were able to elevate the team for a time. I think that's the next level of fresh energy and skill that Tsakiris can bring.
Okay, and also shout out Nico. I just recently saw this like a few days ago. He follows me on Twitter, follows MLS Aces on Twitter. So shout out
awesome.
Nico on that. But yeah, no, look, I mean, Benji, Cade, Jeremy, Jamiro, Christian, just alone, I think is just so much talent on the offensive end that if maybe playing under, you know, a USMNT style like Luchi Gonzalez is most likely going to bring, maybe you get the best out of a guy like Cade, who we saw in the USMNT style last night, you know, ball out. Jeremy Agobasi, same thing, right? So I have high hopes for them. Let's go from that offense, though, to the defense, where I think there's hope, but I think there's question marks as well, right?
Yes, I think so.
The back line is one that has changed a lot in the past 2 years, I would say. If you ask me, and again, I'm going from maybe a point of view that's a little bit more further out, more league wide. You have a Miguel Tracao, you have a Rodriguez, a Nathan, Carlos Akpo as what looks to be the starting four on the back line.
I think so.
Is there any holes or anything you're concerned with, or maybe something that is a question mark that could be a positive for them?
I think that there's excitement that we have some players that we didn't really see too much of. Nathan has been the one mainstay in that back four that looks set to start for this upcoming season. But there is that possibility that we could see, you know, maybe like the Paul Maries, Tommy Thompsons, and the Tanner Beesons, they get that first opportunity because of the familiarity with Nathan and the system. But I think that our most talented center back pairing would certainly be Nathan and Rodriguez, who is on loan from Gremio. So there's always that risk that if you put all your eggs in that basket of a player that's on loan and then Gremio's like, oh, he's playing so good, we want him back, you know, then what? But I feel like with San Jose Earthquakes, they've done a good job of unearthing some gems from these types of leagues. And while Judson, he played in a league below the top division of the Brazilian Serie A, and he's done very well at MLS level. I feel like a team like Gremio, maybe best case scenario would be that while he does excel for San Jose Earthquakes, that Gremio might be able to replace him somewhere else.
Exactly.
As for the fullbacks, I love what Tommy Thompson and Paul Marie have been able to do, but when they're the starters week in, week out, I feel like they start to get a little bit exposed by some of the fast, athletic, skilled wingers at MLS. And when you look at the talent level at MLS, it's been a top-heavy league. So that is a concern, but I think that Tommy Thompson provides some energy and versatility off the bench. So if we can integrate him into that role, that's great. We love Tommy Thompson here. One of the members of Tectonic Takes says he's the biggest Tommy Thompson fan you'll ever see. And he's been part of the San Jose Earthquakes organization for over a decade. We're talking about an organization that's had a lot of player turnover over the year, with the exceptions of the likes of Wondolowski and Salinas. Now they're retired, so now Tommy Thompson is essentially the veteran of the group. And he is the veteran in the sense that he's been in the system for a while, but he turns 28 in August. So he's still got plenty of years ahead of him, whether it be MLS or who knows where else. But I feel like wherever he is within the San Jose Earthquake system, he's still valuable, and he's definitely a great locker room guy. But I think that we do have to start to give these other players an opportunity, these new signings. Otherwise, what are the points of these signings? Because it's nice to have depth, but I feel like these are the more talented players. We do have to have a little bit of a changing of the guard, particularly in midfield, in defense, and goalkeeper, where we love you guys. It hasn't worked out through your fault, no fault of your own. But now this is a new era. This is a new chapter.
Yeah, look, I mean, maybe if Lucci's thinking MLS plays Tricao, Rodriguez, Nathan, Akpo, U.S. Open Cup, it's Paul Marie, Tanner Beeson, Casey Wells, and Tommy Thompson.
It could be a nice season. And I think that for the San Jose Earthquakes especially, we know that we haven't had much success within MLS and MLS Cup playoffs. So we would be fine if San Jose Earthquakes and Luchi Gonzalez prioritized a U.S. Open Cup run. I feel like while we were, begrudgingly happy because there's a bit of a underrated rivalry between San Jose Earthquakes and Sacramento Republic because of, we're the most established NorCal teams. Now we have Oakland Brutes. Now we have Monterey Bay FC, but those are the two mainstays. And of course, there's not that much of a rivalry between the Golden State Warriors and Sacramento Kings, but there is some bragging rights there.
Yeah.
But I think that we're not happy to lose to Sacramento Republic, not because they're a USL championship side, we had a divine right to advance. That's not the case. Sacramento Republic made multiple MLS clubs look, like they were at their level, and Sacramento Republic are a good team. But we were disappointed to go out because we knew that that was our best avenue of getting a trophy that season. So we'll see how that goes. I think the U.S. Open Cup still has a lot of potential in terms of where it can achieve a more respected status like the cup competitions in Europe are within their domestic leagues.
Final question for me, and it's really less of a question, but I need you to get me hyped on two players right now. Two players we may not even really see much of, but I really hope we do. Emi Ochoa, Cruz Medina, two of the most talented youngsters in CONCACAF are sitting, on your guys' depth chart, on first team rosters, on first team contracts. These two homegrowns, I doubt Emi Ochoa we see much of. I think Cruz Medina is one potentially in maybe the second half of the season we could see a little bit of. What's your take and what's the excitement level around Quakes fans for these two?
I think Quakes fans, we love that these young players coming up, that they are talented, that they've shown a lot during Quakes 2, and that they are really personable when it comes to the fans. They're usually among the first players to come in and come out. They greet the fans before and after the game. And I think that's an important part of the culture, that while the Quakes haven't had much success, that it's a reason why the loyal Quakes fans come back and go to as many home games as possible, because we build these bonds with these players. And I think that we're going to have a reason to watch these MLS Next Pro matches because of these players. San Jose Earthquakes did a great job in the MLS Next Pro level, and they tied with the most MLS Next Pro All-Star selections because of how phenomenal they were at that level. So we're going to keep an eye on them for sure.
All right, Ivan, I want to wrap things up. I know you had something that you wanted to mention to wrap things up, so please go for it.
Yes, I do want to acknowledge that while we are excited for, the MLS season from fans across the league, across the United States and Canada, I think it's important to acknowledge some of the tragic events that have happened in the last few days. I taught Monday and Wednesdays at a community college in San Francisco Bay Area, and on both days, there was a new mass shooting that I had to acknowledge with my students. So we're talking about Monterey Park, Half Moon Bay, and Oakland. Monterey Park in LA, and then the latter two in the San Francisco Bay Area. This really hit close to home. All three of them were very sad, and anytime this happens, it's sad. Some people have said it's happened at an alarming rate, and for me, while that is true, when it happens once in 10 years, that's an alarming rate for me. It should never happen, and I know that this is not a political podcast, even though this is our lives, is our livelihood, but I just want to acknowledge that to anyone who's listening, if you're from those areas that were affected by the shooting, or you knew someone who was hurt or lost their life, my condolences, and that we can put this into perspective going forward, whether you are a content creator or just a fan, that, enjoy the community that you are with, because this is why we do what we do. We do what we love because we enjoy interacting with people within our fan bases, across fan bases. We all enjoy soccer and sport because it's a great way to distract ourselves from everyday lives, but sometimes we do have to acknowledge these difficult things. And thank you for giving me the time to say that.
No, of course. And look, everything you said, 100% yes, we talk, we BS soccer because it's fun to distract ourselves from what the real world is sometimes. But definitely, thoughts and prayers, condolences out to those families, those affected, friends, everything like that. And similar to, what happened with Anton Walks out in Charlotte, like,
yes, absolutely. Rest in peace to Anton Walks.
Awful just tragedies that have happened so far to bring this MLS offseason to a close and start the regular season, and make sure just you give those people, those family, those friends, your thoughts, and make sure you impact everyone.
One more thing that I just thought of, one thing that we can do, and it sucks because it's more of a reactive thing rather than like we can make substantial change, but we do have the power that if you have a organization such as your place of work or another place that you spend a lot of time with, suggests that someone schedules, active assailant training. We hope that no one who listens to this has to be in that situation, but that training could save your life someday. And I'm lucky that every organization that I've worked for has had that training. So at the very least, I know that I can potentially make a difference if the worst case scenario happens. And it's scary to think about, but within the situation we are in right now, it's something that I do recommend that everyone familiarizes themselves with their plan A, plan B, plan C, if that were to happen.
Well, I think, Ivan, that's a perfect way to leave this off, of just be safe, impact people around you in a positive way.
Exactly.
Be a good person, right?
Yeah, and that's why we have this platform. Like, we want to do good in various levels, and this is an opportunity to do that.
Exactly. Well, Ivan, thank you for talking some just real world stuff with me, and also talking San Jose Earthquakes.
Right, exactly. We do look forward to this season, the Tectonic Takes. We are still podcast. We do some audio, video things on occasion, but most of our work will be done through written mediums. So look out for, I'll give you a few Twitter accounts you can follow along with @Tectonic Takes for all of us. We will retweet some of our own content. But our main writer, and he also writes some content for Forbes, @Favian Renkel. So that's FAVIANRENKEL. And then the rest of us, if you follow Favian Renkel, you'll be able to find us all from here. I'm @Ivan Ornelas, IVANORNELAS2 on Twitter. And then Abel, Saz, and Abram, we're all doing content in various different ways, covering San Jose Earthquakes, but also other aspects of soccer. For me, I will be going to as many home games of San Jose Earthquakes and Oakland Roots as possible. So I'll be covering both of them.
All right, awesome. Well, guys, make sure you follow Tectonic Takes. Make sure you follow Ivan, and obviously follow along for the San Jose Earthquakes all 2023.
Yes, thank you. And obviously follow MLS Aces as well, because whether it's San Jose Earthquakes or whether it's any of the 29 clubs, I think now at MLS, we're assuming Vegas is going to be 30, but we don't know. But St. Louis, congrats, welcome to the family. Be sure follow MLS Aces, because you do a great job covering all sorts of things. I look forward to listening to all the other previews as well once I get the chance.
Thank you, Ivan. Thank you. I appreciate it, man. Talk to you later.
Yeah, talk to you later. Take care.